The marina in Miami is quietest just before sunset. That's when the boats look expensive but the people don't. My yacht sat at Slip 42B, white hull, brushed steel nameplate, triple engines polished to mirror sheen. The crew had just finished restocking for a weekend charter. Linen changed, glassware lined, diesel tanks full. Everything precise, everything earned. I was reviewing fuel invoices when I heard my name. Not the soft version, the full one. Colette. My mother's voice carries the way people think authority should. I didn't turn immediately. When I did, they were already stepping past the dock barrier. No call, no warning, no can we talk. My father walked like he was inspecting property he co-signed. Navy blazer, sunglasses, expression neutral but evaluative. My sister Camille followed half a step behind, scanning the yacht from bow to stern with something between envy and calculation. 3 years. 3 years since the last message. The last one had read, "If you can't support your family, don't bother coming home." I hadn't responded. Now they were here. The deckhand looked at me, unsure whether to intervene. "It's fine," I said quietly. My mother stepped onto the teak deck and exhaled softly. "Well, this is impressive." "Not congratulations. Inventory." My father ran a hand along the rail. "How much is this worth?" I ignored the question. Camille smiled. "Guess we finally see where the family investment paid off." There it was. Investment. I gestured toward the upper lounge. "You might as well sit. You've already boarded." They took seats without hesitation. Ownership posture. My mother crossed her legs. "We won't waste time." My father removed a folded document from his jacket. "We need $145,000. Not hello. Not how are you. Just numbers." The marina manager, stationed nearby, suddenly became very interested in a clipboard. I kept my voice even. "For what?" Camille leaned forward. "The bank is overreacting. They are threatening acceleration." Acceleration. Meaning the full remaining debt becomes due immediately. My father clarified. "If we don't cover $145,000 within 10 days, they begin foreclosure proceedings." "On what?" "A beat," Camille answered. "The house." The house my grandmother had once visited every Sunday. My mother sighed like this was a minor inconvenience. "It's temporary. You can cover it. It's not a big amount compared to what you're making." Compared. There's always a comparison when people want access to something they didn't build. I looked at each of them carefully. No apology for the silence. No acknowledgement of the past. No recognition of the last time we stood in a bank lobby arguing over a forged signature. Just expectation. My father tapped the paper against his knee. "We supported you when you had nothing." That was almost funny. Camille added, "You wouldn't even be here if we hadn't invested in your potential." Invested. 3 years ago, they told me my refusal to fund Camille's startup was betrayal. 3 years ago, they said I was selfish. 3 years ago, they stopped speaking to me. Now they were sitting on imported Italian upholstery asking for $145,000 like it was a dividend distribution. My mother's tone softened. "We're not asking for charity, Colette. We're asking for family cooperation." Cooperation. I noticed none of them asked how I built this. None of them asked what it cost. They were looking at the yacht like it was a vault, and they believed they had the combination. I folded the invoice in my hand slowly. "You ignored me for 3 years." My father didn't blink. "Don't dramatize." Camille rolled her eyes. "Can we not make this emotional?" Emotional. The word people use when they want to avoid accountability. My mother leaned closer. "This is about responsibility." I finally looked at the water instead of them. The marina lights flickered on. Golden reflections across black surface. Stillness above. Pressure below. They hadn't come to reconnect. They had come to collect. And this time, I wasn't the daughter they remembered. They didn't wait for me to respond. They assumed compliance. That's what happens when people believe access is permanent. My father unfolded the document in his hand and placed it carefully on the glass table between us. Bank letterhead. Default notice. Highlighted amount. $145,000. Camille exhaled dramatically. "It's just bridge coverage. Once I restructure, we'll be stable." "You said that 3 years ago," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "The market shifted." "Of course it did. Markets always shift when accountability approaches. My mother leaned forward, lowering her voice into that familiar tone she used when she wanted something to sound noble. We raised you, Colette. There it was, the opening calculation. My success minus their sacrifice equals my obligation. My father added smoothly, education, housing, support. Do you think that was free? I held his gaze. My inheritance wasn't free either. A flicker, small, almost invisible. Camille jumped in quickly. Can we not reopen ancient history? We're talking about now. Ancient history. It had been 3 years. My mother sighed as if exhausted by my lack of cooperation. Families invest in each other. When one succeeds, everyone stabilizes. That sentence is dangerous. It removes individual responsibility and converts achievement into communal property. Camille gestured around the yacht. You think you built this alone? Yes. The word landed clean. No anger, no volume, just certainty. My father leaned back in his chair. This attitude is exactly why we distanced ourselves. Distanced. They cut contact. Rebranded silence as principle. My mother pressed on. Your sister is facing foreclosure. Do you understand what that means? I do. Camille's voice sharpened. Then act like it. There was no apology for the years. No acknowledgement of the forgery. No recognition of what it took for me to rebuild. Only urgency. Only extraction. I studied the numbers on the default notice. Outstanding principal, $238,400. Immediate demand, $145,000. Interest rate, predatory. Whose name is the loan under? I asked evenly. Camille hesitated. My father answered. Camille Ventures LLC. But we personally guaranteed it. Translation, the house is collateral. I nodded slowly. And liquidity. My mother shifted in her seat. We're temporarily tight. Temporarily tight. Meaning empty. Camille crossed her arms. You're being cold. No. I was being precise. My father's tone hardened slightly. If we lose that house, your grandmother's memory goes with it. Emotional leverage. Always heritage when money fails. I watched them carefully. They believed this was still a moral negotiation. It wasn't. It was financial positioning. My mother softened again. Just transfer the $145,000. We'll handle the rest. Transfer. Like I was wiring a casual gift. My sister smiled faintly. You make that in a quarter. Assumption laid over assumption. My income became their estimate. My discipline became their access point. They were so confident, so certain I would fold under obligation. They hadn't asked how I survived the last collapse. They hadn't asked what I learned. They hadn't asked what I became. Because in their equation, I was still the variable they could move. They thought I was still the daughter who begged. I folded the default notice neatly. I'll review the numbers, I said calmly. Camille's shoulders dropped in relief. My mother smiled. My father nodded, already satisfied. They mistook analysis for surrender. They had no idea I was calculating differently. And this time, I wasn't solving for forgiveness. 3 years ago, I was standing inside a branch of Bank of America holding a transaction printout that did not make sense. The amount was precise. $212,480.17. Every cent of my grandmother's inheritance. Gone. Transferred into an LLC I didn't recognize at first. Camille Ventures. The branch manager kept his voice professionally neutral. The authorization appears valid. He turned the screen slightly toward me. There was my name. My signature. Almost. The C curved incorrectly. The pressure line on the final E was too sharp. It was a careful imitation. Careful enough to pass. Careless enough to insult me. I didn't sign this, I said quietly. He hesitated. Well, it was notarized. Of course it was. My grandmother had left that money directly to me. Not jointly. Not conditionally. Direct transfer upon probate completion. I hadn't even moved it yet. I left the bank and drove straight to my parents' house. Camille answered the door first. She knew. That's the thing about guilt. It arrives before confession. My father was sitting at the dining table with paperwork spread in front of him. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked inconvenienced. I placed the bank statement on the table. What is this? My mother walked in from the kitchen, drying her hands slowly like this was a casual interruption. My father skimmed the paper. It's an investment. In whose name? Your sister's company. You forged my signature. Camille's eyes filled instantly. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. My father's tone hardened. The money was idle. It was mine. It was family capital. There it was. The rebranding. My inheritance wasn't stolen. It was reallocated. My mother stepped closer, voice low and rehearsed. You don't even understand how business works. Camille had momentum. We couldn't let opportunity die because you were hesitating. Hesitating. I hadn't even been asked. Camille spoke through controlled tears. I was going to pay you back. With what? I asked calmly. She didn't answer. My father leaned back in his chair. If you take legal action, you destroy this family. That sentence sat between us like a loaded weapon. It wasn't denial. It was threat disguised as unity. You forged a legal document, I said. My mother's face changed. Cold. Don't use that word. Forgery. She didn't blink. Adjustment. Adjustment. They didn't steal from me. They reallocated me. I remember looking at each of them that night and realizing something permanent. They weren't ashamed. They were justified. And justification is more dangerous than guilt. I could have gone to the police. The notarization irregularities were sloppy. The timing suspicious. But I saw something else in that moment. If I exposed them, they would blame me. If I sued, I would become the villain. If I fought emotionally, I would lose strategically. So I walked out. Not defeated. Not forgiving. Just done. The next morning, my father sent a message. If you can't support this family, don't bother calling. That was the last communication. Until now. After that night, I rebuilt. No inheritance. No safety net. I took contracts in marine logistics. Learned freight margins. Studied vessel compliance. Took night certification courses. I slept 4 hours a night for almost a year. Camille posted photos from Tulum with captions about entrepreneur life. Her company burned through my inheritance in 18 months. No product market fit. No discipline. No accountability. And when the capital disappeared, so did they. Silence for 3 years. Until foreclosure approached. Until they needed liquidity. Until my success became convenient. Back on the yacht, watching them sip my wine and calculate my net worth, I realized something. They still believed I was emotionally accessible. They still believed guilt was leverage. They still believed I would argue. They had no idea I had been studying something else entirely. Debt structures, lane priority, acceleration clauses, and how ownership shifts quietly. They thought they were negotiating with their daughter. They weren't. They were sitting across from someone who understood acquisition. And this time, I wasn't the asset. After I walked out of my parents' house that night, I didn't cry. I calculated. I listed every expense I had. Every skill I didn't. The inheritance was gone. The illusion was gone. But something else replaced it. Clarity. I moved into a studio apartment 20 minutes from the port. No balcony. No view. Just proximity to opportunity. The first job I took was administrative support for a marine freight broker. Paperwork. Compliance codes. Tariff classifications. Container routing. It was boring. Which meant it was powerful. Because boring industries are profitable when you understand them. I learned how ships are financed. How charter contracts are structured. How marine insurance disputes are settled. How default clauses trigger asset seizure. I learned that ownership rarely shifts in loud ways. It shifts in documents. Camille, meanwhile, rebranded 3 times in 18 months. First a wellness app, then a lifestyle subscription box, then venture consulting. Each time, new social media photos, new captions about scaling, new borrowed confidence. I watched without reacting. Not out of bitterness, out of pattern recognition. 18 months after they drained my inheritance, Camille Ventures began missing vendor payments. I know this because one of those vendors eventually became my client. The irony was almost elegant. My parents never reached out during that period. Not when I worked double shifts. Not when I studied marine finance certification at night. Not when I saved my first 6 figures. Silence is very clear when it's intentional. 3 years later, I didn't just work in marine logistics. I owned equity in charter routes operating through Miami and Nassau. I didn't post about it. I didn't announce it. I structured it. LLCs led properly. Assets separated from liability. Revenue clean. When I purchased the yacht, it wasn't indulgence. It was leverage. High net worth clients prefer private negotiation environments. Deals close faster on water. That's something Camille never understood. Presentation without foundation is expensive. Foundation without presentation is scalable. So when they sat on my deck asking for $145,000, I already understood the real number. The default notice listed the outstanding principal as $238,400. High-interest private lender. Personal guarantee. House as collateral. Predatory structure. Which meant the lender didn't want negotiation. They wanted enforcement. And enforcement creates opportunity. That night after they left the yacht, I didn't open my banking app. I opened the lender's contact information. The firm handling Camille's note was based in Fort Lauderdale. Private debt acquisition group. Aggressive. Efficient. Unsentimental. Perfect. When I called the next morning, I didn't introduce myself as a relative. I introduced myself as a potential note purchaser. There was a pause on the line. Then interest. Are you aware of the default status? The representative asked. Yes. And the risk exposure? Yes. Why would you want this paper? Because I understand leverage. Because default is predictable. Because family ties don't override contract law. But I didn't say that. I specialize in distressed asset repositioning, I replied calmly, which wasn't entirely untrue. They forwarded the documentation within hours. Interest rate. Punishing. Late penalties. Compounding. Acceleration clause. Enforceable upon confirmed insolvency. I smiled when I read that part. Confirmed insolvency. All I needed was voluntary admission. And they were desperate enough to provide it. The lender initially asked for 70 cents on the dollar. I counted at 55. We closed at 60. $143,040 would have been the payoff they expected from me. Instead, for $143,040 minus lender discount adjustments, I secured control of the entire $238,400 obligation, plus enforcement rights, plus lien priority. Ownership shifts quietly. That's the lesson they accidentally taught me. When the assignment documents finalized, I didn't feel anger. I felt alignment. For the first time, the equation balanced. They believed I was reviewing whether to rescue them. They had no idea I was restructuring their position entirely. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to accuse. I wasn't going to relitigate the past. I was going to do something far more permanent. I wasn't going to fight them. I was going to acquire them. I invited them back 2 nights later. Not urgently. Not emotionally. Strategically. Come by Friday. I texted Camille. I'll have clarity. She responded in under a minute. Wealth anxiety sharpens responsiveness. The marina was busier that evening. Weekend crowd. Adjacent yachts hosting small gatherings. Music drifting lightly over the water. Visibility matters. Not for humiliation. For psychology. When people feel socially elevated, they lower defenses. I had the lower deck arranged differently this time. Soft lighting. Open bottle of Bordeaux. Crystal glasses. A charcuterie spread I knew my mother would approve of. Presentation disarmed suspicion. They arrived confident. Camille was wearing something new. My father looked relaxed. My mother carried herself like resolution was imminent. You've always had good taste, she said as she stepped aboard. Ownership tone again. We settled at the dining table below deck. I poured wine. Let them talk first. Camille didn't wait long. So, you've reviewed the numbers? I have. My father leaned forward slightly. And? I need documentation for my accountant before I move funds. That sentence did 2 things. Confirmed I was moving funds. Introduced structure. My mother smiled faintly. Of course. Sensible. I placed my phone on the table. Screen visible. Recording indicator clear. For compliance, I said lightly. My CPA requires verbal confirmation for high-value transfers. IRS audit trends have been aggressive this year. The word IRS tightened the room subtly. My father adjusted his cuff. Fine. Greed overrides pride. I began calmly. State the total outstanding balance. Camille exhaled. With penalties, around $238,400. Exact figure. She glanced at her father. $238,412. Precise. Good. And the lender has issued acceleration. Yes. Meaning $145,000 is due within 10 days to prevent foreclosure. Yes. And without external liquidity, you are unable to satisfy that demand. Silence. My mother spoke first. We're temporarily illiquid. Temporarily illiquid, I repeated. Meaning you cannot pay. Camille's jaw tightened. Yes. Voluntary admission. I took a small sip of wine. And the collateral? Camille's voice dropped slightly. The house. Owned solely by you. Technically under the LLC but personally guaranteed. And your personal guarantee includes wage exposure. She blinked. Yes. My father frowned slightly now. Is this necessary? Yes. Pause. Then I asked the most important question. The initial capital used to launch Camille Ventures. Source. My mother shifted. My father exhaled slowly. Family funds. Specific source. Another pause. Your grandmother's inheritance. Clear. On record. No coercion. No raised voice. Just fact. Camille laughed nervously. This feels excessive. It's compliance, I replied calmly. I slid a folder across the table. I've prepared acknowledgement documentation for transfer protection. 22 pages. Structured cleanly. Assignment acknowledgement. Debt reaffirmation. Personal guarantee confirmation. Notarization clause. Camille flipped immediately to the signature tabs. My father skimmed the header briefly. Assignment and restructured creditor acknowledgement. He didn't process it. Because he wasn't expecting ownership shift. He was expecting liquidity. My mother hesitated slightly. What's assignment referring to? Transfer tracking language, I answered smoothly. Standard when third-party funds are involved. True. Just not in the way she assumed. The notary I had arranged dockside stepped aboard casually, introduced as someone finalizing vessel registration paperwork. Timing matters. Authority presence reduces hesitation. They signed. All three. Each signature slow but confident. Because they believed they were securing rescue. Camille leaned back, visibly relieved. See, this didn't have to be dramatic. My father nodded. Family always resolves internally. Internally, yes. Just not the way they imagined. They toasted. They laughed lightly. Camille even began talking about her restructuring plan. I watched carefully. The overconfidence phase is always the quietest before collapse. They believed the transfer was coming Monday morning. They believed the debt would shrink. They believed I was still negotiating as their daughter. They had no idea the lender had already assigned the note to me 48 hours earlier. They had no idea their insolvency admission activated acceleration under new ownership. They had no idea they had just reaffirmed enforceability under my control. Greed makes people careless. Entitlement makes them blind. As they left the yacht that night, Camille hugged me. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't return the pressure. Because gratitude isn't owed when the contract hasn't closed. And this one had already closed. I asked them to return the next morning. No wine this time. No music. Just coffee. Daylight makes everything more honest. They arrived with visible relief. Camille was already smiling when she stepped onto the deck. Did the wire clear? My father checked his phone before even sitting down. Nothing yet, he muttered, but he wasn't worried. They assumed timing. I gestured for them to sit at the lower table again. The same place they signed. Familiarity lowers defense. Camille crossed her legs confidently. So what's the transfer schedule? I folded my hands neatly on the table. I didn't pay the debt. Silence. Not confusion yet. Just a delay in comprehension. Camille blinked. What? I didn't send $145,000. My father's posture stiffened slightly. Then what did you do? I slid a thin document across the table. Assignment of promissory note. Executed. Filed. Timestamped. I purchased it. No one moved. My mother leaned closer, eyes scanning the page. This says. Yes, I said calmly. The lender assigned the full $238,412 note to me. Camille laughed once. Short, sharp, defensive. That's not funny. It's not a joke. My father read faster now. His jaw tightened. You bought the debt. At 60 cents on the dollar. The number landed. Why? Camille demanded. Because you couldn't pay it. The A shifted. My mother's voice thinned. So just forgive it. There it was. The reflex. Access assumed permanent. I'm not the bank, I replied evenly. My father's tone hardened. You're our daughter. I met his eyes without blinking. I'm your creditor. The silence that followed was heavier than anger. Camille stood up abruptly. You can't enforce against family. I can enforce against default. She stared at me. You tricked us. No, I corrected. You confirmed insolvency voluntarily, on record, and reaffirmed your personal guarantees. My father's voice rose for the first time. You manipulated that dinner. I documented it. My mother looked at me like she was trying to find the child she used to negotiate with. You wouldn't take the house. It's collateral. Camille's voice cracked. You're punishing me. No, I said quietly. I'm enforcing a contract. There's a difference. They were searching for emotion in my face. Guilt, regret, doubt. There was none. Because this wasn't emotional. This was structural. Foreclosure filings initiate Monday, I continued. You'll receive formal notice. Camille shook her head slowly. You're destroying us. I let that sit. 3 years ago, when I stood in their dining room holding proof of forgery, they didn't consider that destruction. They called it reallocation. My father tried one last angle. Think about what this does to the family. I have, I said. And I'm restructuring it. My mother's eyes filled, but it wasn't sadness. It was shock. The realization that guilt no longer worked. That leverage had shifted. That I wasn't negotiating from love. I was operating from ownership. Camille's voice lowered to a whisper. You'd rather be right than kind. I stood slowly. I'd rather be solvent than manipulated. No shouting. No threats. Just clarity. They left the yacht without hugging me this time. Without thanking me. Without certainty. As they stepped onto the dock, I saw something I hadn't seen in 3 years. Fear. Not of me. Of consequence. And consequence isn't emotional. It's procedural. The foreclosure notice was delivered 5 days later. Certified mail. Signature required. I didn't send it personally. My attorney filed electronically through the county clerk's office in Miami. Summary judgment request attached. Default documentation included. Acceleration clause activation. Voluntary insolvency admission. Reaffirmed personal guarantee. Notarized acknowledgement. Clean. Efficient. Unemotional. Camille called twice the first day. I didn't answer. She left one voicemail. This is insane. We can fix this. Call me. I deleted it. My father sent a text instead. We need to discuss restructuring terms. Restructuring. Interesting choice of word. 3 years ago, they didn't offer me restructuring when my inheritance vanished. Now they wanted flexibility. I instructed my attorney to respond formally. All communication through counsel. It changed the tone immediately. Once lawyers speak, emotion becomes irrelevant. Camille attempted to delay the filing by claiming predatory lending practices. That argument failed. She signed voluntarily. Twice. The hearing was procedural. No theatrics. No dramatic objections. The judge reviewed the documentation quickly. Default established. Standing confirmed. Lien priority valid. Summary judgment granted. Just like that. The house entered foreclosure. Camille tried to negotiate a payment plan afterward. I offered one. Full principal plus accrued interest within 30 days. No extension beyond statutory limits. She couldn't meet it. The auction date was scheduled. My parents stopped calling. Silence returned. But this time it wasn't punishment. It was inevitability. When the house sold below outstanding balance, a deficiency remained. The personal guarantee activated wage garnishment. Camille's consulting income, what little remained, became partially redirected. Court order. Automated. There is something sobering about seeing numbers rerouted by legal mandate. Not emotional punishment. Mathematical correction. My mother attempted one last visit to the marina. The dock manager didn't allow boarding without authorization. Policy is useful that way. I didn't step outside. There was nothing left to say. 3 years ago, I learned something important. People who justify taking will justify blaming. So I removed the argument entirely. The system doesn't negotiate guilt. It processes default. And for the first time in our family, accountability wasn't redirected. It landed exactly where the contract placed it. A month after the foreclosure finalized, I took the yacht out just before dusk. The marina behind me was calm, predictable, ordered. The skyline of Miami stretched across the horizon in glass and steel, sharp edges catching the last of the light. I prefer leaving the dock slowly. Acceleration wastes fuel. Precision doesn't. The engines hummed beneath my feet as Slip 42B grew smaller behind me. The same slip they had stepped onto with entitlement. The same deck where they asked for $145,000 like it was a forgotten reimbursement. I checked my phone once before setting it down. 3 unread messages. 1 from Camille. 2 from unknown numbers. No apologies. Just variations of negotiation. Can we settle this privately? You've made your point. This doesn't have to go this far. It already had. I opened my contacts. Scroll to Mother, Father, Camille. Deleted. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just efficiently. When you understand contracts, you understand something else too. Access is a privilege, and privileges expire. The house was gone. The lien satisfied. The deficiency judgment structured. Camille's wages redirected automatically through court order. My parents downsized quietly into a rental across town. No announcement. No public explanation. Just consequence. They told people it was market pressure. I didn't correct them. I wasn't interested in humiliation. I was interested in closure. The water ahead opened into deeper blue as I steered toward open ocean. The city reflection fractured behind me, distorted by wake. 3 years ago, they believed my inheritance was communal capital. They believed I would never choose enforcement over emotion. They believed guilt was permanent leverage. They were wrong. Love is free. Bailouts are not. And family isn't priceless. Access is.